Was a time when you saw the world with startling clarity. As a child, you noticed things others missed. The slight shift in tone, the truth behind the silence, the beauty in what others rushed past. Your mind was sharp, your questions endless, your heart tuned to something deeper. You didn't just learn, you absorbed. You didn't just observe, you understood. And for a while, the world seemed to marvel at your brightness, even reward it. But slowly, quietly, something began to change. You began to sense that certain parts of you were more acceptable than others, that approval came not from being whole, but from being good. And so you shaped yourself to fit. You became what was praised, what was useful, what kept the peace. You performed instead of expressing, succeeded instead of feeling, and smiled instead of speaking the truth. The brilliance didn't leave you, it hid. And now perhaps, you've reached a moment in life when the applause has grown quiet. The roles you played feel heavy, and you look at yourself in the mirror and wonder where you went. The once vivid colors of your inner world have faded into a dull fog. You get through the days, but you rarely feel lit from within. You might have everything you thought you needed, stability, achievement, even recognition, but something inside remains unmet, unspoken. Carl Jung believed that the gifted child often pays a hidden price. That which makes you exceptional can also make you vulnerable to being shaped, used, and praised into forgetting who you truly are. Because when the child learns that love is earned through performance, they abandon their truth to survive. And now, the ache you feel isn't failure, it's the call to remember, to return, to reclaim what was buried beneath the mask. This is not a loss. It is a sleeping brilliance, waiting for the courage of your return. In the pages that follow, we will trace the quiet unraveling of the gifted self and the path to its rebirth. And as you begin to recognize the invisible moments where you are shaped into someone you are not, something remarkable happens. You don't just remember who you were, you begin to become who you were always meant to be. You were the one who noticed everything. Not just what was said, but what was left unspoken. Even as a child, you could sense the quiet tension behind a parent's smile, or the way the air thickened in a room just before someone's mood shifted. You learned early that words were rarely the whole truth, and so you stopped relying on them. You started listening to the invisible music between the lines. Carl Jung believed that this kind of brilliance is not merely about intellect. It's about adaptation. It's what happens when a child doesn't just grow up, but absorbs the emotional climate of their surroundings to survive. If your home was full of unspoken sorrow, you became joy. If it was angry, you became quiet. If it was chaotic, you became the calm. And because you were so good at it, the world applauded. They called you wise beyond your years, helpful, mature. But underneath the praise, something else was happening. Something fragile and quiet. You were trading pieces of yourself to keep the peace. Think of the little girl who always made sure everyone was okay. She cleaned up the messes, smoothed over the arguments, and made people laugh even when she felt like crying. Or the boy who became the achiever, whose trophies lined the shelves not because he loved to compete, but because success made the tension at home dissolve, at least for a little while. On the outside, they looked brilliant. On the inside, they were disappearing. Because when you are constantly tuned to the needs of others, your own needs begin to sound like noise. You forget how to listen to yourself. You learn to suppress the parts that feel too soft, too needy, too real. Jung warned that when we live only through the roles others assign us, we exile the authentic self to the shadow. Over time, you begin to feel like a stranger to your own life. You make decisions that look good on paper, but feel hollow in your chest. You excel, but never exhale. You wake up in a life that checks all the boxes, but doesn't touch your soul. And maybe now, in this very moment, something in you is stirring. Not a crisis, a calling. A quiet voice asking, whose life is this, and where did I go? The tragedy is that the world rewarded your disappearance. You became what everyone needed, and they thanked you for it. But no one asked what you needed. no one noticed the cost. The identity you built was so admired that even you forgot it was a mask. And now, the emptiness you feel isn't failure. It's the grief of self-abandonment. It's the pain of brilliance misused, not for creation but for survival. And yet, it's not too late. That inner voice, the one you silenced so long ago, is still there, beneath the performance, beneath the persona, asking not for more success, but for more truth. So, how do you begin again? Not by reinventing yourself, but by returning, by listening to what was buried, the feelings you were told were too much, the instincts you learned to second-guess, the dreams that felt selfish, the voice that once whispered, "What about me?" The journey home is not a straight path. It's a remembering, a reunion, and it starts not with proving your worth, but with reclaiming it. Not through someone else's script, but by writing your own. Because the truth is, you don't need to become someone new. You need to meet the self that never left, only hid, waiting for your permission to come alive again. There comes a moment, not loud or sudden, but steady and unsettling, when you realize your entire life has become a stage. You're not sure when it happened. Perhaps it was the day you felt that silence after telling the truth and decided it was easier to smile. Or maybe it was the time you dimmed your opinion to avoid tension and people called you wise for being so easygoing. Slowly, without noticing, you stopped being. You began performing. Your laughter became rehearsed. Your yes became a shield. You learned which version of you got love, approval, and safety, and you became that, not out of manipulation, but out of survival. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, and though it serves a purpose, it is not who you are. The persona is the costume we wear to belong, but what happens when the costume becomes skin, when the applause grows louder, but your soul grows quieter? You look at your life and, from the outside, it shines. The titles, the image, the relationships. You've made others proud. You've done what was expected. But when the room is quiet and the mirrors are honest, something doesn't feel right. You wake up not to yourself, but to the version of you others have known. Charming, composed, reliable, but increasingly hollow. There's a subtle ache beneath the perfection, an inner dissonance that no success can quiet. And maybe for the first time, you feel it not as confusion, but as grief. A grief for the self you had to hide just to stay close to love. Imagine the high-achieving woman, always gracious, always composed, always saying yes. Her voice is soft, her schedule is full, but behind her eyes is a quiet panic. She doesn't remember what she loves. She doesn't know what rest feels like. Her life is curated and admired, but it no longer feels like it belongs to her. She walks through her days like an actress who's forgotten the script was once a choice. And yet, something in her is stirring. A part of her, long buried, is whispering, "This isn't it. There's more." This is the threshold Jung called the call to individuation. It is not the call to abandon everything or revolt against the world. It is subtler and braver than that. It is the call to remember the parts you silenced because they didn't match the persona. The part that wanted to cry instead of console. The part that wanted to rest instead of perform. The part that didn't care about being impressive, only honest. These parts are not your flaws, they are your keys. They are your map back to yourself. The world taught you to polish your edges so you'd fit. But now you are aching for your rawness. You are no longer seeking comfort through imitation. You are craving aliveness through truth. And this awakening, though sacred, can feel like loss. Because letting go of the mask threatens the very identity you spent years perfecting. Who will you be if you're no longer the pleaser, the achiever, the peacemaker? Who will love you when you stop trying to earn it? But what you're actually losing is the burden of performance. The illusion that worth must be proven, and what you're gaining is intimacy with yourself, and eventually with others, who see the real you and stay. Jung taught that wholeness is not found in becoming perfect. It is found in becoming real, and realness requires us to face the parts of ourselves that make others uncomfortable. The anger, the sorrow, the softness, the needs. It asks us to sit with the shadow, not to shame it, but to welcome it home. So you begin, not with fire, but with gentleness. You begin by noticing. You begin by telling the truth in small ways, saying no when you mean no, pausing when you feel rushed, crying without apology, resting without guilt. You begin by shedding what no longer fits and letting your soul breathe again. And slowly, something incredible happens. The people who only loved the mask begin to fall away, but the people who see you and love you anyway begin to appear. And more importantly, you begin to see yourself, not as the version that earned praise, but as the one who was always enough, even in her mess, even in her silence. This is the turning point, not in becoming someone new, but in reclaiming someone ancient. The child before the mask, the soul before the performance, the brilliance that was never gone, only hidden. And as that light returns, so does your life. Not the one you built to survive, but the one you were meant to live. And this next part of the journey is not loud. It doesn't arrive like a revelation. It creeps in through the quiet moments. The ones when you look strong but feel like you're sinking. No one ever warned the brilliant child about this part. They praised your competence, your strength, your resilience, but never noticed how early you had to become those things. They didn't see that your independence was not a choice, but a necessity. There's often a moment, small, almost untraceable, when something breaks inside a gifted child. Not with thunder, but with silence. A need is unmet, a cry is ignored, a truth is dismissed. And in that space, the child learns a dangerous lesson. I cannot rely on anyone. From that moment on, survival becomes performance. You smile to appear fine, you succeed so no one asks questions. You become emotionally fluent in everyone else's needs while becoming illiterate in your own. You build strength like armor, not because you want to be untouchable, but because you learned that being soft made you invisible. And over time, that armor grows thick. You wear self-sufficiency like a badge, but beneath it, you are weary. Not because you are weak, but because you've never known the feeling of resting in someone else's arms, emotionally, spiritually, or otherwise, without fearing it will cost you your dignity. Imagine the person everyone turns to in a crisis, the one who never cries, never asks, never falters. She's the rock, the steady one. But behind her eyes, there's a tiredness she doesn't know how to express. She doesn't remember the last time someone asked her how she was without needing something from her. She doesn't resent others, but she does feel invisible. She gave the world her strength, but no one ever thought to ask if she had a place to fall apart. And when she does try to soften, to rest, to let herself be held, something inside tightens, because vulnerability, though longed for, still feels dangerous. Carl Jung once said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power." But hyper-independence is the will to power dressed in survival. It's the child who learned that depending on others meant being let down, that to need is to risk being hurt. So you built a kingdom with no doors, only windows through which you smile. You became so capable that people forgot you were ever a child at all. But what they don't see is the cost, the chronic loneliness hidden beneath the praise, the emotional fatigue behind the strength. And what you may not yet realize is that true independence doesn't come from never needing. It comes from choosing when to open and when to protect. Real power is not in pretending you're never afraid. It's in admitting that you've carried too much for too long, and you're ready to be seen without earning it. Healing doesn't come from further perfecting the image of having it all together. It comes from the quiet bravery of letting someone in, not to fix you, but to witness you. It comes from saying, "I'm tired," without softening it with a joke. From whispering, "I need help," without flinching. from remembering that the strong one has a heart too, and it longs not for admiration, but for genuine connection. Jung didn't define wholeness as invulnerability. He called it integration. To be whole is to hold both the warrior and the child within you, to know when to fight and when to rest, when to lead and when to lean. And here is the truth that might catch in your throat the first time you say it out loud. You don't have to carry it all, not anymore. You can be powerful and still need people. You can be wise and still be learning. You can be deeply intuitive and still feel lost. This is not weakness. It is humanity. The moment you stop pretending you're unshakable is the moment you remember what it means to be real. And in that softness, you don't disappear, you return. To you who never stop hoping someone might finally see through the strength. The you who doesn't want to prove anything anymore, only to feel what it's like to simply be. This is not the end of strength. It is the beginning of authenticity. And when you finally speak the truth you've hidden beneath your smile, you may discover that the world doesn't fall apart. It leans in. Not because you're impressive, but because you're finally honest. But beneath every mask, every performance, every carefully orchestrated version of yourself meant to earn love or prove worth, there lives a quieter truth, one that waits in the shadows of your own silence. It is what surfaces when you finally stop running, when you slow your pace enough to feel what you've been trying not to feel. It's not the world you've been trying to impress that suddenly confronts you. It's you, the real you, the one you've avoided. Behind striving, achievements, and exhausting perfectionism, there is a single haunting question that refuses to be quieted. Why do I still feel so empty? This is the moment that unravels even the most accomplished among us. You've done everything right. You've fulfilled the checklist. You've shown up strong, intelligent, and capable. You've succeeded in all the ways the world deems worthy. And yet, late at night when the noise dies and the mirrors can't flatter, you stare at the ceiling and feel like a ghost inside your own life. Carl Jung warned that if we abandon our inner world long enough, we become strangers to ourselves. We begin to mistake productivity for purpose, praise for presence, and admiration for love. And though the world may celebrate your brilliance, your soul knows when it's being used as collateral, when your value has become a currency in the marketplace of approval. You don't need to be told this with words. You feel it every time the applause fades and the silence rushes back in. You feel it when someone compliments your strength and all you want is to be allowed to be soft. You feel it when you check another box, complete another task, and realize that nothing inside you shifted. The external world keeps moving, but your internal world remains still, distant, hollow. And perhaps the scariest part of all is the realization that you're not sure who you are without the striving. That, without something to prove, you might just vanish. Imagine the woman who has climbed every mountain placed before her. Her walls are covered in certificates. Her name is spoken with respect. Her calendar is always full. But there's a drawer in her nightstand where she keeps pieces of herself she doesn't know how to explain. Scribbled dreams, moments she wished she had said no, questions she never dared ask. She opens it sometimes, in secret, and stares not at regrets, but at the truth of what was buried so she could be enough for everyone else. What she longs for isn't another mountain to climb. It's permission to sit down and finally ask, what do I want? If I'm not trying to impress anyone. This is where the brilliant child often ends up, as a high-depth-nighting adult who can meet every demand but cannot feel their own joy, not because they aren't capable of happiness, but because their entire self-worth was built on conditional approval. Jung taught that real healing begins not when we add more to our lives, but when we peel away what doesn't belong. You don't reclaim yourself through more accomplishment. You reclaim yourself through subtraction. You sit with yourself, not the version that wins, but the one that wonders. You ask, who am I beneath the title, beneath the strength, beneath the praise? You may not have an answer right away, but asking is the beginning of your return. There will be discomfort, a kind of emotional detox as you step out of performance and into presence. You may tremble in the stillness, unsure of how to be seen without effort, but slowly you'll begin to feel something that's not admiration, not productivity, not reward, but realness, aliveness. It may arrive like a whisper, like the moment you look at your reflection and recognize not the person others admire, but the one who's been waiting to come home. That is your truth. That is yourself, and it was never gone, only buried beneath what the world told you was necessary to earn love. You are not here to constantly prove that you belong. You are here because you already do. And the parts of you that were silenced for being too soft, too slow, too unsure, they are not flaws to correct. They are fragments of your wholeness, waiting to be held again. You're not broken because you feel tired. You're tired because you've been pretending for too long. But now that pretending has lost its grip. Now you crave something deeper. Not applause, but authenticity. Not recognition, but resonance. Not admiration, but presence. And this is where the real journey begins. Not in becoming someone new, but in remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. In the next chapter, we enter the moment of sacred reckoning, the one where you finally stop asking, "What do they want from me?" and instead whisper, "What does my soul remember about me that I've forgotten?" The answer will not just change how you live, it will change how you live. There comes a moment, often so quiet it's mistaken for peace, when the brilliant child disappears, not from the world, not from their routines or responsibilities, but from themselves. It happens not with a crash, but with a slow dimming. One day, they're still showing up, still smiling, still answering, "I'm fine," on cue, but the light behind the words is missing. Their voice, once curious and unfiltered, is now cautious and edited. Their presence, once animated and intuitive, is now calculated. And if you were that child, you know the shift. You didn't stop existing, you just stopped being seen. Not because you chose to vanish, but because you sensed the world only wanted pieces of you. The polished parts, the agreeable parts, the high-achieving parts. So you gave them what they wanted and locked away the rest. Carl Jung called this disowned part the shadow. Not evil, not broken, just exiled. The parts of yourself that didn't fit into the mold. The messy, loud, impulsive, sensitive, passionate, unpredictable parts got pushed underground. But what is buried doesn't die. It waits. And over time, it begins to whisper through your life. It leaks through your reactions, your fears, and your resistance to love. You sabotage closeness, not because you don't crave intimacy, but because the part of you that was once dismissed refuses to believe it's finally safe to be held. You overachieve not out of joy, but out of fear that without constant doing, you'll disappear. That's the cost of hiding, a fragmented self that keeps you performing in public while unraveling in private. Imagine a man in his 40s, successful on the outside, composed, respected, but alone in his car, after a long day of meetings and expectations, he feels something strange rise in his chest. A lump, an ache, a memory he can't explain. It's not about the day he had. It's about the years he spent abandoning the boy inside him who once painted wildly, laughed uncontrollably, cried without shame. That boy is still there, knocking from within the silence, asking to be remembered, not to interrupt, but to return. The man grips the steering wheel and wonders, why do I feel like a stranger in my own body? That question isn't a weakness. It's awakening. It's the beginning of the reunion. The shadow isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to reintroduce you to yourself. Every reaction that feels irrational, every emotion you suppress, every part of you you judge for being too much, is not a flaw. It's a breadcrumb leading you back to the parts of you that got exiled in order to be accepted. The irony is that those rejected fragments, your tenderness, your rage, your longing, are the very ingredients of your wholeness. Without them, life becomes mechanical, predictable, numb. You laugh at the wrong moments. You flinch at kindness. You chase relationships that mimic old wounds. You resist the ones that could actually heal you. Because a life built around rejection of the self cannot sustain joy. It cannot recognize love. It survives, but it cannot feel alive. So, how do you begin to reclaim what was hidden? First, you stop pathologizing your emotions. You stop calling your tears dramatic. You stop labeling your sensitivity as a flaw. You listen. You let the discomfort speak. You hold space for the parts of you that were once too loud, too wild, too tender for the room. Sit with your sorrow without trying to fix it. Let the anger rise without fearing it will consume you. Allow the joy to return, not as a reward, but as a right. You begin to understand that those feelings you've run from are not dangerous. They're sacred. They are the original language of your soul before the world taught you to speak in edited tones. Jung believed that the path to individuation, the journey toward becoming whole, is not about abandoning who we were. It is about integrating what we've hidden. Healing is not an escape from the past. It is an embrace of it. So when that inner child knocks on the door through your sleepless nights, your anxiety in silence, your ache during moments that should feel full, don't shut them out. Don't shame them. Open the door, let them in. Tell them, you don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to be impressive to be loved. You are safe now. That's not regression. That's a return. You were never meant to be a perfect adult. You were meant to be a whole one. And wholeness isn't pristine. It's messy, it weeps, it laughs too loudly, it forgets and remembers, and breaks and repairs. But above all, it feels. You were a brilliant child, not because you were flawless, but because you were fully alive. And that aliveness didn't die, it just got buried under masks and milestones. Let that aliveness return, not as a version of who you were, but as a reclamation of everything you still are. That is the real you. That is the beginning of home. And so, here you are, no longer the child looking for permission to exist, no longer the adult performing a life to feel deserving of love. You've stepped beyond the applause, beyond the noise, into the quiet center of your own being. Not empty, not lost, but full of everything you once set aside to survive. This isn't about becoming someone better. It's about remembering the beauty of being someone real. And that realness carries a gravity, a stillness, a knowing. There's nothing more to chase. There's nothing more to earn. You finally realize that your presence, exactly as it is, holds more truth than any polished version of you ever could. The voice within, once silenced for safety, now speaks with the strength of someone who has walked through fire and found their name in the ashes. You begin to understand that healing isn't a finish line. It's a homecoming, a return to the self who never asked you to be anything but honest. And even when the world continues to tempt you back into performance, you'll feel it now. That quiet resistance, that sacred boundary, that soul-deep whisper that says, I remember. I remember who I was before the masks, before the pleasing, before I forgot what joy unfiltered felt like. The world may still ask you to shrink, but now you know you don't have to. You can stay soft and powerful. You can speak the truth and still be loved. You can rest without guilt. You can be seen without shame, because the journey was never about finding yourself out there. It was always about returning inward, brushing the dust off the mirror, and recognizing your own reflection with reverence. So let the old roles fall. Let the echoes of too much fade into the distance. Stand in the light of your own presence and feel its warmth, not the blinding heat of expectation, but the gentle flame of your truth, steady, ancient, and wholly yours. Carl Jung didn't ask us to strive for perfection. He asked us to embrace the totality of who we are. And now you carry that knowing not in your thoughts, but in your breath, your choices, your way of being. The brilliant child you once were is no longer waiting in the shadows. They are walking beside you now, hand in hand with the adult who finally chose them. This is not a conclusion. It is a return to origin, a rebirth, not into a new identity, but into an unshaken intimacy with your soul. So take this moment, this breath, and step fully into the life that only truth can build. Let the world adjust to your light. Let your presence be the permission someone else has been waiting for. The brilliant child has not vanished, they have evolved, and now, with clarity and courage, they live, fully, fiercely, freely, in you. If something within this message stirred you, if even a single word mirrored your inner experience, I invite you to let your voice be heard in the comments. Have you encountered that soul whose presence feels like home, or are you still walking the sacred path back to yourself? Your story, however unfinished, may become the lantern in someone else's darkness, the very sign they didn't know they were searching for. And if someone close to you is silently struggling with the illusion that love must hurt, that self-abandonment is the price of connection, or that they are unworthy of peace, share this video with them. Help me reach the ones who need to remember. Real love does not demand that we shrink. True connection does not ask for sacrifice of the soul. And the most vital union we will ever form is the one with our own inner truth. Before you go, I invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell. Here, in this space, we journey beneath the surface of things, exploring the hidden architecture of the psyche, the whispers of the unconscious, and how every relationship is but a mirror reflecting our personal evolution. If there's a theme, a question, or a wound you would like us to explore in future videos, leave it below. This space breathes because of you. Your voice is not only welcome here, it is essential. Thank you for showing up, not just to this video, but to your inner work, to the sacred labor of remembering who you truly are. And always remember this, when the right person appears, your soul will know, not through fear, but through peace. But until that moment, let your most intimate relationship be the one you cultivate within. That is the foundation, that is the home. And from that wholeness, all things real are born. Until next time, I'll see you on the path.